Hello, dear viewers, you're watching Obn Horn of Africa Talk to Obn Show. In this edition, I'm joined by Michael Masre, Diplomacy and International Relations Analyst. In this episode, we'll be talking about access to seaport, as well as the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. Stay tuned with us. Michael, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
Well, talking about the access to seaport,
Yes.
More than 40 countries in the world, and among these countries, 17
Yes.
are in Africa. So, what's your take on the main cause of this issue?
Yes. I think being landlocked is mostly historical and geographic reality rather than a policy choice of countries. Many borders were created or drawn during the colonial time. During the colonial time, in a sense, there was an African partition by the European powers, and most of the Africa countries were colonized by African masters or colonial masters. And most of the countries' ports were created with that conditions, because after the end of that war, there were colonial boundary demarcations, and most of the countries were, delimited in the interest of these colonial powers. In that case, most of the Africa countries become landlocked, whereas they were, have the access to the ports. And the other one is political fragmentation. Wars of independence and the border changes in the 20th century, increased the number of landlocked countries. If, for instance, if we see for the Africa, a mix of colonial borders and lateral state formation was the main cause of that. If we see a practical example about Ethiopia, the colonial powers, as we remember, that Ethiopia is not colonized, but there were colonial powers come to the Horn of Africa. If we see Italy, France, and Britain, their colonial states were around the Horn of Africa, like Somalia, Djibouti. We can see France in Djibouti. You can see Italy in Eritrea, and we can see also Britain and Italy in Somalia. So that the borders or the coastal lines were in the hands of these colonial masters. As Ethiopia, one of the ancient country with access to sea, especially for Miswa and Port Asab, following that colonial sentiment, it has lost its motherland Eritrea. Then Ethiopia becomes a landlocked country. But there were an attempt in 1952 within Eritrea's federation with Ethiopia. The main purpose of that federation was not only to incorporate it as lost territory, but also to get the chance for Ethiopia to have access to the sea. And luckily, we were succeed in that case. But later on, that created a kind of independence. Then we remember the long-standing war between Ethiopia and Eritrea get this independence in 1993. Following that, Ethiopia lost its access to sea, especially in the port of Asab and Miswa. And that increased the numbers of landlocked countries in Africa, especially in the Horn of Africa.
Well, you've been talking about the Ethiopia. Ethiopia used to have access to seaport, but since the independence of Eritrea, like you said, Ethiopia lost its access to seaport. So, in this regard, what's your viewpoint on the matter?
By the way, let me take you back for a few more years, because Ethiopia was one of the trading nations in the ancient world. Because Ethiopia was basically known for its trading up to the Asia and the Far East and India and mostly in the Europeans. That means Ethiopia was one of the pioneers in this sea transport. In that case, Ethiopia used two different ports. If we remember that, the port of Adolit, the port of Deila to the Sudan, and also the port of Massawa. We call it Bahara Nagash. This means countries or states or empires has a great power over the sea. That means Bahara Nagash. We can call that. Nowadays, that is Massawa or Red Sea. In that case, Ethiopia was one of the ancient country that has its own ports, but now it becomes landlocked, which is a very mystical and very something very inciting for this generation to recall, to get this ancient prestige. In that case, now Ethiopia becomes a landlocked country, so we need to revive that sentiment and regain back our lost ports, and a different diplomatic engagement is underway, and we are looking to get or succeed in this attempt. The breakup with Eritrea made Ethiopia reliant on neighboring arrangements like Port of Djibouti and Berbera and others, mostly on Djibouti. So this will create a highly dependent on the capacity of the neighbor countries. As you know, Ethiopia is a huge country in terms of size and population, close to 130 million people, and Ethiopia's growing interest is expanding year on year. For that matter, we need more export and import transportation. For that matter, we need a kind of infrastructure that could exist Ethiopia's quest or interest. But Ethiopia's motive is not getting it is attempt, because our import and export is depend on the neighboring capacity, so that we should have to rely on Djibouti, not only on its port access, but also on its capacity of infrastructure. Unless in other ways Djibouti, expand its port access, we can't even use or utilize that in the interest of us. As you know, Djibouti is the smallest country in the Horn of Africa, and its population is not more than 2 million, and its economic capacity is not also that much growing. For that matter, it is 60% of GDP is from Ethiopia's port access, and most of it is port areas and infrastructure developed by either UAE through the DP or the Chinese government. So that when these partners are working on the infrastructure, they may have their own interests. That means it may push back Ethiopia not to utilize as we demand, as we need of it. So that being landlocked is a very challenge for an aspiring state like Ethiopia, with an economic, political, and regional power. So that it has a lot of side effects.
Since Ethiopia lost its access to seaport,
Yes.
The country faced many challenges, especially
Yes.
Politically, socially as well. We can say economically. So, how do you put that? Ethiopia relies, like you said, on Djibouti port for over its 90% of import and export trade. So, how these affect the country?
Oh yeah, it is a comprehensive. Being landlocked means just fighting your enemy, either using only your hand or lost one of your legs. So you can't stand firmly on the ground and face your enemy. So being landlocked has 3 or 4 or more impacts on Ethiopia. If we see economically, the higher transport costs, longer logistics and chains, and also dependency on a single corridor raises import and export costs that reduce competitiveness. For example, this year, Ethiopia's export is posed to $8.3 billion. But this is a very significant number. And recently, as President Taye Asqaselasi said on the parliament, this is a flagship and a changing chapter in our economic aspirations, because it is 116% jump from the previous year. Assume that if Ethiopia has its own port, our exports can be, may be multiplied than these numbers. Nowadays, export is the blood cell of Ethiopia's economy, because Through export, we get foreign exchange and we get foreign direct investments. And the world's economy is most predominantly by using dollars and foreign currencies. And most of the Africa countries, including Ethiopia, are suffered with lack of these foreign exchanges, you see? That's why we are aligned our interests with fundings like IMF, World Bank, and other bondholders. Recently Ethiopia's bond holding was negotiation was stuck on Paris, and this was a very headlines over the European and the African medias because we don't have that much the foreign currencies. This is because we are landlocked countries, and the impact of being landlocked has a lot of economic significance. So that the cost of transport we paid for Djibouti $2.5 billion annually. This $2.5 billion is a lot of investment. Imagine $2.5 billion flagship project with Dangote at Gode Fertilizer. It brings a lot of changes for Ethiopian economy. Assume if we use that $2.5 billion we pay for Djibouti ports for internal economic development aspire, how it could change our economic aspiration. The political issue is mostly related to security. Port dependency forced Ethiopia into delicate diplomacy with transit status. That means particularly Djibouti or Sudan or Eritrea. Which can constrain foreign policy autonomy during crisis times, you see. For example, if something happens in the Horn of Africa, we have seen that alignment is between our historical enemies, for example, Sudan and Egypt. As our attempt last year, remember what that MOA with Somaliland, immediately the reacting state was Eritrea, Djibouti, and Sudan. And they were even created an alliance, a three-party alliance, because once Ethiopia get the port access, its economy will boost, and it is political will stable in the country. It is social interaction will boost in the country. That means our living condition totally changed. In that case, we become a political hegemony in the Horn of Africa. In that case, we become the decision makers. The social impact is, the higher cost of goods affect our consumption here at home. Limited direct coastal access constrains maritime industry development and related job creation. Suppose if we have our own ports, 10,000 million jobs, 10,000 jobs might be created for youth who are very in need of that job in Ethiopia. And also the cost of goods will be reduced significantly because, if the logistics and the transport costs are reduced, now the per unit of the products or the consumption products at home will be also reduced. In that case, our social coexistence will boost. So being landlocked has economic, political, and social consequences for landlocked states.
Well, Michael, as a diplomacy and international relations analyst, yes. What's your viewpoint, especially in access to seaport, as per the international?
The international law allows states to interact each other because in this interconnected world, no country is isolated. If that was enough, we don't need a diplomatic relation with either Russia, Djibouti, or US, or UK, or something like that. But as the status of the world has different resources, there should be the interplay of international relations. And mostly the international economy or import and export is conducted through these ports. So that without a port, you can't send or export your products, whether it is an agricultural product, semi-finished product, or manufacturing goods. So that we need this port to enhance our diplomatic relations. The more, let's see that a port is a key to unlock the external world or the world beyond the sea. Unless in other ways you can't remain and keep grow with what you have at hand. In history, we remember Japan. Japan used a closed door policy once upon a time. Then once upon a time when the world opened up, Japan was one of those underdeveloped or developing states. Then immediately they changed their foreign policy orientations, and they start to communicate with the world, and they start to export their products, manufacturing goods. Even they send their students to learn abroad in the US and Europe. Then they came back to their country, and now Japan became the third most developing nation in the world, even in technology, the first, I can say. So that these overseas trades are enhanced through these ports. So access to port or to regain our former status is a very significant achievement for Ethiopia. So we should have to proceed our quest to access to sea.
Well, Ethiopia is currently becoming the voice for especially landlocked countries.
Yes.
So what this move implies, what do you think about that?
Let's recall what happened a few months ago in Turkmenistan. Close to 34 landlocked states were there to discuss their future fate. And I remember Antonio Guterres, the Secretary of UN, said that being landlocked should not determine the fate of the status, and this geographical circumstance no more determine the fate of states. In that case, Ethiopia was there to show the ramifications of being a landlocked country, and in that World Summit of these landlocked countries, Ethiopia shows it is legitimate quest over the access to the sea, and the world understand what landlocked states are in need of this access to the sea for their economic, political, and social developments. That's why nowadays Ethiopia's quest for the sea is the question of not only Ethiopians but our neighbors, but our development partners, and also the heads of states of different countries. For example, in the recent UN summit, different countries, echo Ethiopia's quest for access to the sea, and beyond, unlike before, when Ethiopian delegates demonstrate or raise the question of Ethiopia's need of this access to the sea, they are, understanding Ethiopia's quest, because Ethiopia's growing population, Ethiopia's growing economy, Ethiopia's growing quest for this access to the sea becomes a legitimate question. If we remember the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, they accept the sea, and also even our foreign partner, the president of Somalia, even accept and change their mind, and they started a diplomatic negotiation on ways how Ethiopia and Somalia could use ports together for a mutual benefit, so that the recent Ethiopia's voice on the global stages and with all its neighbors gets a momentum of positivity and acceptance. That is a very interesting and promising move.
Well, the other thing is, Michael, the Agenda 20, EU Agenda 2063 implies that African member countries must work on common development, and it encourages common development and aspires to see prosperous, integrated Africa. So in this regard, reciprocity is very important. Like, for instance, the Ethiopian government is, exporting electricity all the way to Tanzania, and also expecting something from the neighboring countries. So, what do you think about the EU Agenda 2063, which encourages common development and also Ethiopia's need to get access to seaport?
Oh, yeah, a very overlooked agenda, I think. Agenda 2063, we don't really understand what it is, because it is something that we don't realize. There are 17 agendas under Agenda 2063. One of is regional integration. Regional integration and using flagship projects like the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and others. when you see that Ethiopia nowadays becomes the energy hub of the African states or the continent, if we see the completion of the GERD within a capacity of more than 5,000 megawatts, and it is also a $5 billion project. So this has a significant contribute for the development of Africa, because most of the African countries need energy sources, and the GERD is one of the flagship project that could provide the energy that the African countries are in need of. And South Sudan, Somalia, including Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda are looking this. For example, 80% of the Kenya's energy is from Ethiopia. So this is something that is achieved through Agenda 2063. The other one is, for example, the nuclear energy, and also this, the Gode oil refinery. All these are contributing for the need of Africa's economic growth, which is also in the hemisphere or in the scope of that Agenda 2063. The other one is integration. So when we say integration, these logistics, port development is, and infrastructure is the basics. For example, as part of the Africa Free Trade Continental Area, now Ethiopia last week started to export its products and services like agricultural products, and but that was shipped through the Ethiopian Airlines. Is that enough? We need more alternatives. We need more channels like freight transportation and through port transportations. If Ethiopia do not have this port or access to port, or even invest on port development along with other neighboring countries, this Agenda 2063 of regional integration cannot be achieved. So that Agenda 2063 is a flagship project that wants us to see Africans interconnected through different means, through land, air, and also sea transportations. So that in that case, we need to integrate in terms of human capital, infrastructure, and also resources. To make that happen, we need to have a kind of cooperation based on mutual interests.
Mikhail, thank you so much. The other thing is when we talk about like common development, integration in Africa, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam come to the front.
Yes.
Because it is very flagship project, mega project, $5 billion project.
Yes.
Which even bless the entire East Africa whole region, I can say.
Yes.
So how do you see and take the Ethiopians' contribution to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, as well the commitment?
Yes, a very great question. Ethiopia's Renaissance Dam has a lot of great achievements to tell for the world. The first one is that it is a very flagship project, which is a $5 billion and also 5,000 megawatts, which is a very huge energy source. From the beginning, this is a homegrown project because it is built by Ethiopians through their skills, through their time, through their energy, through their finance or individual or citizen finance. We don't get any external finance from either IMF, World Bank, or Africa Development Banks. And this shows that our commitment for achieving our common goals, which is flagship project that Ethiopia have already exemplified. This shows us how Ethiopians can achieve something which is very important and flagship in the country, in the region, in Africa. And this is also an example that Agenda 2063 is happened, because one of the 17 agenda is that building a flagship project like energy sources, and the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam is one of that. The other one is most of the Horn of Africa and the Africa countries are in need of energy for their economic development, whether it is in manufacturing, whether it is in a big energy demanding sectors. So Ethiopia could provide electricity for Kenya, for Tanzania, Rwanda, even Sudan, and even other countries. But to make that happen, there should be what? Cooperation agreements. And there should be negotiations, there should be an agreement between these countries, unless we may not be using this, the advantage of the African markets. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam used to create more than 15,000 jobs for Ethiopians, but now when the energy is exported to the neighboring countries using that energy could also create jobs for their citizens. Job creation is very demanding in the coming years because there are users that are looking for jobs in the entire region. And there should be industries and manufacturing and companies and industries that could accompany these quests. So that Energy One, as Ethiopia is one of the energy exporter and energy hub for the African countries, it will be a good source of or ally for their economic aspirations. So that the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is not only Ethiopia's asset but also the other countries' asset.
Ethiopia has already inaugurated the Grand Renaissance Dam, but
Yes.
Egypt still claims the 1929 and 1959 colonial treaties. And what do you see the response from the Ethiopian side?
I said Egypt is continuing reading the old book, while we have written and also published our new chapter in the Africa history, because the completion of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam GERD and opening of the business is already here. So we unveiled that big dam. Now, for the last 14 years, GERD was like a baby in a womb. Now, GERD is a baby that's running over the road that everyone is looking at it. So that while Egypt is there, having that old sentiments and call for already the deed and the lost claims of the 1929 and 59, which is almost deed. I have seen recent sentiments by Egyptian Prime Minister and President and also Egyptian analysts. And there are attempts to also open files in the UN Security Councils for 14 times. As we remember, Egypt used to open file against Ethiopia over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam 13 times, but Ethiopia has defeated that within diplomatic negotiations and diplomatic dialogues. And the Egyptians and the Sudanese quest for bringing African questions for the UN Security Council shows Africa's strong stand for African solutions for African problems. That's why, as we recall, in 2019 and 2020, when Egypt and Sudan were filed against Ethiopia in Security Council, the then UN Ambassador Taye Asqaselasi and also the former minister Engineer Sleshi Bekele was already told the world that this is a wrong attempt, that Egypt can't get benefit through that. And that shows that nothing stopped Ethiopia from being accomplished and open this. So this shows that old resentments are no more to be used at this time. But still Ethiopia is open up for negotiations. And if we remember, when the Trump senior advisor came to Ethiopia, and also in Trump's recent visit to Egypt, they tell them that Egypt's claim over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam can't get solution through political means. It needs a technical means. And the technical means is almost done because Ethiopia has developed this dam through the 2015 Declaration of Principles. And nothing has happened without that Declaration of Principles. And the Declaration of Principles was reached an agreement with the technical committees of Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt, and the 11 territorial peripheral states or of these Nile basin, so that there is no technical problem on that document. So Egypt knows that through technical means she can't achieve what it wants. So still it shows that it is a stringent stand, which is not acceptable in the world's today's diplomacy.
Michael Masre, diplomacy and international relations analyst, thank you so much for your insight on the sea access as well as the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam current issues.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me. It was very eye-opening discussions, and we will continue contributing such kinds of insights.
Well, you're welcome. Dear viewers, this brings us to the end of our today's edition. Stay tuned with other Obn Horn of Africa programs. Bye-bye.